Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Good Deeds Note Investing podcast. I am your co-host, Chris Seveney, along with Jamie Bateman. Jamie, how are you doing today?
It's Friday. I feel like I got a lot done this week. Doing fine. Doing pretty well. How about yourself, Chris?
Yeah, I kind of feel like you got hit by a tornado almost. Today, this week has just been a complete whirlwind of, just a lot of stuff going on. I feel like I got a lot accomplished, which we'll roll into. I mean, our trials and tribulations this week. Last week ended on, kind of a, after the podcast we recorded last week, I had a ejectment, which is kind of a forfeiture eviction essentially on a property that the borrower was using it. It's a triplex, was using it as a rental. I won't get into too much details on it because it's still open, but living in the property are individuals who, were, former military, have health issues, just a lot of stories on this one that, we ended up pausing or pushing off the ejectment just because of, the everything involved. It was, one of those things where I clearly did not have the heart to, essentially eject somebody at this point in time for different things. We wanted to buy a little more time to try and work things out. So that will be interesting to say
It is
the least.
interesting. So that is slightly different than an eviction.
It's really an eviction. They just call it an ejectment because the difference is they have no obligation to you. So, they're not my tenant. So I'm not evicting them. It's more they are kind of a third party living in the property who may have an agreement with somebody else. So that's why it's considered an ejectment. It's more just of a legal term, my understanding, not an attorney. Ask your attorney the difference. But no, this week, we sold some assets. So that's good. Basically we've got a fund that's wrapping up in the next few months. So we'll be putting more assets out for sale for people from that perspective. And, a lot of cleanup this week of paperwork, getting some stuff recorded. I got 36 loans being boarded at the end of the month. So I wanted to put those in my systems. So just a lot going on. Yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've got a lot going on as well. We've actually got, with our rentals, we've been doing a little bit more recently. So we've got 7 rentals in Maryland, and 4 of them are turning over here in the next couple months. So we don't self-manage, but still have to manage the manager and make decisions, and there's always moving parts with that. And and then also we're doing this build to rent property in Ocala, Florida, and the builder just upped the price $20,000 on us, because I say that sort of tongue in cheek. I mean, that's true, but he's good. And the fact is, like, lumber prices have skyrocketed since we went under contract for this in June of last year. Honestly, we're still getting it at a really good price, probably $30,000 below what he could turn around and sell it for. So we're still moving forward with that, but working out, financing and things like that. So, I mean, working on wrapping up an ebook that'll come out hopefully in the next, hopefully when this comes out, within a month of this episode airing, hopefully. But so, just a lot of moving parts. Yeah.
Yeah, we actually got word. So we got one rental right now. That's a condo that's having a trouble renting because nobody wants to kind of go into condos and visit it right now. And then we got another one. Our tenant just let us know he wants to move out at the end of the month. And I was talking to my wife last night, and yesterday in the news was a report that essentially they may look to get rid of the long-term capital gains. And I just looked at my wife and I'm like, well, maybe it is a good time to sell. We're at peak market. We've had them for, I don't know, 6-7 years. We've got, we make decent money off them. Maybe just turn around and just sell them to get them off our.
So what is, I saw a couple headlines. I didn't have a chance to dive into it too deeply. So essentially it's capital gains would all be one rate. Is that what it is?
Capital gains will be ordinary income. I mean, there's really no more capital gains. And again, this is so preliminary. Nothing's been proposed. Right. They mentioned it was about, on the wealthy or whatnot. But the way I interpreted it was capital gains would essentially go away because everything would just be taxed at your ordinary income. So,
got it. I might have to revise my ebook if I don't get it out soon.
well, I mean, we can. I mean, we'll spend more time on that because in the
Yeah.
long run, actually, for note investors, that's actually a benefit in the sense of
Yeah.
competition, because everyone wants
Sure.
to invest in physical real estate because of the tax depreciation and its long-term capital gains. Where
Right.
notes is ordinary income. If it's all the same, then we're kind of the same playing field. But
Yeah. No, it makes a lot of sense.
so
Yeah.
okay. Well, today topic we're going to talk about when to get an attorney involved on a non-performing note. So interesting topic. We had somebody in the group recently ask this question, and also I got subsequent another email from somebody I'm mentoring who had bought a loan that was performing, and it's kind of now going a little shaky. So they're wondering, at what point should they get that attorney involved? So that's today what we're going to talk about, so people understand when is the right time to get an attorney involved. And Jamie, I'll kind of let you start with it, and I'll throw in my banter as usual.
Yeah. I mean, I think my knee jerk reaction is sooner rather than later for multiple reasons. But, it's for one thing, borrowers are really used to seeing mail and communication, whether that's phone calls, email, whatever it is, from their servicer, especially non-performing borrowers. It's the last thing they want to, person they want to hear from is their servicer. So sometimes when they get a letter in the mail from an attorney saying we will initiate foreclosure on you or on your property, that might it gets their attention a little bit faster. So there have been times where I've kind of delayed trying to, reach out to the borrower, have communication, discuss things, and certainly that's a viable option. But I at the same time get that process going, get the demand letter going. There's nothing wrong with having both I guess processes or tactics moving parallel at the same time. In other words, send your demand letter and then negotiate during that time period. So obviously all of this is state dependent. Talk to your attorney, but I think that only puts you in a position of strength even more as a lender, as an investor, because if the borrower knows there's a threat of foreclosure that's real, then they're more willing potentially to talk to you. So, we can certainly go through case studies and things like that. I would, as I've done this more and more over the last few years, I think it's just send that demand letter through an attorney. I don't use any of my servicers to send demand letters. I always go through an attorney at this point. So, yeah, I certainly have more to say about that. But what do you think, Chris?
So let's rewind it a little, back just a little bit. So let's start with I want to start with, like you mentioned, getting an attorney involved. I get mail all the time from the same companies, and most of the time, throw it in the shredder. And I'm just assuming that maybe it's a bank statement that gets emailed to me, or it's a recall notice on my vehicle, whatnot. Again, it's stuff I assume that's being emailed to me. I'll be honest, I don't open some stuff, and sometimes, oops, maybe I did chew something up. Borrowers, think about it that way. I'm sure we all have done that. Now think about if there's a bill you're not paying, you're just thinking, oh, another statement I'm not paying on, just put it in. So if they're getting a goodbye letter, like when you buy the loan from the prior servicer or the new servicer, they're probably not even seeing that. So just wanted to start with that. And then we mentioned about when you said sooner rather than later. So let's walk through the process of when you should start. So let's say today is middle towards the end of April. Let's say you closed on a note today, Jamie, and we'll just kind of walk through that process. You funded the money, and then the next step is, technically today you own that note. You could send a demand. Well, you own the note, so yeah, you wouldn't send a demand letter today. So that whole boarding process takes about how long?
I mean, you should allow up to 4 to 6 weeks. Hopefully, it doesn't take that long. But
yeah, so that's the process where the loan and all the information gets transferred from one servicer to the next. If you're using the same servicer, it's much faster. When it's different servicers, let's just say it's 4 weeks. So let's say today's May 1. Okay, then it's June 1. You're at June 1. when that servicing transfer gets taken care of. And then once it's done, the servicer then sends a hello letter, which a hello letter is a letter to the borrower, which states, there's a new lender, we're your new servicer. And there's language in there, though, that says if you disagree or dispute this debt, please let us know within 30 days.
Mm-hmm.
Now, have you had conversations with your attorney about sending a demand letter during a hello letter within that time period at all?
I'm not. I'm assuming you have, so go ahead.
Maybe, yeah. So most attorneys will wait till the hello letter expires because it's not clear whether or not you can send a demand for payment when the person still has time to whether or not they dispute the debt or not. Mm-hmm. And is it considered predatory? Probably not. Is it potentially a fair debt collection violation? Probably not. But if they did dispute it, then your demand letter, just throw it out the window and you just spend $100 on nothing, because mm-hmm. you have to respond to them and you can't demand something that they're disputing. Then that's where they could maybe say, hey, you're trying to force me to pay something I'm disputing. Who knows?
Yeah.
But I
definitely have had my servicer tell me to wait too. So, yep. Which is good.
Okay. So we buy it, say April 1st, May 1st, it gets boarded, and June 1st it expires. Okay. Mm-hmm. So it's June 1st, and you haven't heard from your servicer. They haven't basically heard from anybody. Do you send, and let's say the loans, we're going to do two scenarios here. One, a loan more current, one, a loan further behind. Let's say mm-hmm. the loan is 3 years past due and there hasn't been a payment in 18 months.
And no communication?
No communication. Servicing notes, basically, you see called, no answer, called, no answer, called, no answer, called, no answer. What do you do?
At this point, I send a demand letter. Yeah, absolutely.
So you have options. You could, maybe send a door knocker if the property's occupied. You could send your own letter. There's other options you could do. The question is, do you do one of those or do you do the demand letter? And
yeah, I much prefer to get my attorney involved and send a demand letter. Yep. Keep my servicer in the loop. Obviously, they're involved in everything, yep. But I don't send my own demand letters. I have used door knockers before. Another thing I will do, I haven't used one in a long time, to be honest. But another thing I will do is just send out, property inspector just to gather some information, whether that's through the attorney or not. But that's not a bad idea as well. But
so a few things I'll mention about door knockers. One is during COVID, really haven't used them because they're not really going to mm-hmm. do anything. In the past, pre-COVID, I've had door knockers who would get there, knock on the door, get somebody, and literally take the phone and be like, here's the servicer, they want to talk to you. To that point, which is actually pretty cool. Mm-hmm. And again, I think the door knockers run about, let's say, $50-$60, maybe 50 to 75. A demand letter is 100 to 150. So you will save half, but on a loan that's been delinquent for several years, I agree. I typically don't send that demand. I'm sorry, I do send that demand letter right off the bat. Boom, get it out the door. Let's start the process. And then,
and it's not like you'd be saving that money necessarily. You still, if the door knocker isn't successful, you'd still have to send a demand letter, right? Yeah, so, I just cut right to that. Cut the door knocker out.
Yeah, because this is one of those. If you open your note training manual, it's the gray area because, there's factors you got to take into account. How long's a loan been delinquent? Because we're going to have another case study where loans maybe not as delinquent, but something that's, been a while where you haven't heard from them and you can't get in touch with them. It's especially if the servicing notes said they've sent door knockers and stuff like that, you're wasting your time, You're wasting your money. So it's important, kind of note and bolt right now, get those servicing notes and read what's going on. And one of the things that I'll mention too is, there's some servicers out there right now that really don't have servicing notes, so it makes it a little more challenging from that mm-hmm. perspective. But the typical FCIs, Madison, SNs, they usually keep very detailed servicing notes that they can send away.
Yeah, that is quite frustrating, to be honest, when there are no servicing notes, not only from an investor lender standpoint for asset management, but then when you go to sell an asset
Yep.
or buy one
Hmm.
where there's no servicing notes,
Yeah.
that's disappointing.
So
But
okay. So we've been through, okay. So we just did a case study where borrower hasn't been paying for a while. So process, and it was funny actually, somebody I know just sent me an email saying, the servicer asked if we should send a door knocker, because it's been after the hello letter expires. And he says, do I send it or do I just go to legal? And this was actually the case study I was talking about. The one is this person's note, whereas, you know what? Nope. Just, if it was me, I would send a demand letter. Hopefully, you can get them to interact and get them on a, some type of mod or forbearance plan or something along those lines.
right.
But that's, in this instance, I recommend you start with that, legal reach out early on.
Yeah,
So,
and even if regardless of whether you're switching servicers or not, I think that's smart, because just one quick follow up is sometimes the borrower realizes, even if it's just the TILA letter where it's changing ownership, but it's staying with the same servicer, they may be testing you, as the new lender to see. So you want to set that tone that you're not messing around. So
oh, well, one thing I'll mention is, and I had a borrower tell my attorney this, is they thought I was bluffing. And on one instance, because prior lenders would start a foreclosure or whatnot, but drag it out and never really do anything. And then, I came in and, I've got pedal to the metal, I'm going. And, this person thought I was calling their bluff. And all of a sudden they realized I'm not. And it caused them to scramble, let's just say, because they're like, oh, this person's not going to do anything because nobody else has done anything in the last 5 years. And people get in that mindset,
right.
and thinking, oh, it just keeps getting sold. Nobody's going to do anything. Nobody's going to do anything. And then the moment you do, they're like, yeah, right. He's not going to do anything. And then when you really get to that point, a lot of times they realize that unfortunately it's too late.
Well, it's like, I know you want to move on to the next case study,
No,
but it's like in in the military or any kind of leadership training, even parenting and that kind of thing. They always say it's easier to come in strong and then back off. It's much harder to be a nice guy for 6 months and then ratchet up the penalties and the consequences. It's a lot easier and more effective. Not only easier, but it's more effective to set the tone that you're serious, and then you can kind of maybe back off if it makes sense.
Yep. So let's do another case study. Maybe we'll do 3 today. We'll see. So in this instance, you bought a loan, let's say it's performing maybe a month behind, but they're making consistent payments and maybe they miss once out of a year. And you buy the loan on April 1st, gets boarded on May 1st, and now it is May 21st, and their next payment due is still April. Okay, so they basically were like 1 month behind, but it got boarded plus another, hello letter went out, that 30 days expired, plus another 3 weeks after that. What do you do?
I mean, I just had one very similar to this, and I do think these case studies are really helpful because the answer is always it depends. But in this case, I'm just waiting a little bit. I mean, I just had one where I bought it. It was self-serviced, right? And the borrower had been paying on time every month for 8 or 9 months when I bought it, and it's with a servicer. And apparently, so he did fall a month or two behind during that transfer, but the word was that he did not know where to send his payments. And you might say likely story, right? But I guess he doesn't get mail at the house, whatever it is. He's actually, point being, it's with a servicer now. He fell a month or two behind. I didn't do anything. I just waited. He's caught up or almost caught up at this point because he didn't know where to send his. I don't think he got the letter, frankly. So there's no. I'm not going to jump the gun there and spend $100 on a demand letter. And so it depends, right? But no, I'm going to delay a month or two at least in that scenario. How about you?
Yep, same. And few things that I recommend to people are, maybe then you could send a door knocker, would be one option. Another is sometimes what I'll do is I'll print the statement and print also like my own little hello letter, basically just noting, hey, just want to make sure you got this, that your loan got transferred. Here's where the payments need to go for future reference. And I handwrite the envelope, so it looks like it's not just a
form letter
from somebody.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, what is this? And you probably get a higher open rate. So that's another tactic that I've used from that perspective. So, I mean, that's a lot cheaper than a door knocker. I mean, you're paying what's a stamp today? 55 cents?
I don't even know. I think so, around that.
So you're spending less than $1 to send that versus 50. Now, you may end up having to send a door knocker, but it's a lot, starting out with $1 should not, if the dollar is going to screw your pro forma, then you got bigger problems from that perspective. But yeah, typically it's just a wait, and this is where servicing comes in. It's very important with the servicer to have them try and reach out and get in touch with that borrower and making and technically the loan's not non-performing, it's still performing, so they're not charging that higher rate for the workouts, but they'll still make some of those phone calls just to check in to see what is going on. Some other ways, like you mentioned, if it's a different address or whatnot, make sure to check the tax records to see the mailing address of the borrower, to see where that is. I recommend getting some type of skip tracing software where you can run a quick skip trace to see potential other addresses on there. I don't recommend you emailing the borrower without their permission, because that's still a gray area if it's owner occupied. If it's non-owner occupied, you're away from some of the CFPB and those fair debt collection type acts. Emailing somebody in that instance typically not an issue, but consult with your attorney. Owner occupied, definitely want to make sure you consult, but typically leave it up to your servicer, from that for the reach out component. And but there's nothing that says you can't send a letter, with a copy of their statement or hello letter in it, just to give them a refresher.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
So,
I'm curious what the third scenario is going to be, though.
So the third scenario is you have a loan that is, performing, non-performing. So let's say you had a non-performing loan and there's a forbearance plan on it. Or I was going to use a bankruptcy case, but we don't want to use that because you can't. You can still deal with bankruptcy in a different way. But you have a forbearance plan with the borrower. The borrower misses a payment on the forbearance plan. Okay. So let's say it's a 6-month forbearance. They make the first 2 payments. They miss the third.
It says you've boarded it with the servicer. They've made the first 2 payments, so right?
Let's say, okay, scenario. You board it with the servicer. Servicer hears from them. They're 18 months behind. They say, I really want to keep this house. Okay. And they want to keep the house. Again, they're 18 months behind. You're like, well, I'm not going to give you a mod right now. Can we, and let me step back. You boarded the loan, basically no reach out, no hearing from them. The month goes by. You send the demand letter. Okay. And they react and they're like, uh-oh, I need to do something. I'm 18 months behind. Oh my God, please don't take my house. You can't foreclose. I've been here for 9 years. I grew my kids here. I have a tree house. This is where my grandkids now come to play. Trust me, you're going to hear every one of these stories. We don't have enough time for this today. So they call the attorney. She's in tears, crying. What can I do to keep my house? And you decide, okay, I will give you a 6-month forbearance plan. If you make this amount of payment for the next 6 months, then we'll modify the loan where we'll roll the payments into the back end. This is something that's pretty common that happens. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you say, okay, great, $1,000 down for the forbearance plan, and then you're going to pay $500 a month. We're going to keep numbers simple here. So they're like, great. They sign the forbearance plan, cut you a check for $1,000. Woohoo! And then they make the first 500, they make the next 500, the third month, 500 doesn't show up.
This is a tough one.
It depends.
I don't think I'm sending, just with the information you just gave, I don't think I'm sending a demand letter immediately.
Well,
Maybe that's a mistake, but
well, the demand letter's already been sent, so it's
sorry.
forbearance. So you
So
basically can just continue with foreclosure
right,
and the
right.
complaint.
I don't think I'm right. I don't think I'm pursuing legal after the first missed payment. Hopefully borrowers don't listen to this, but I'd probably give it a couple months, to be honest. Whether I should or not, I'm not, who knows, but yeah, it's not, I'm not sitting there, with refreshing my browser to see if they hit that 31-day mark and then moving forward with foreclosure. So it's probably going to be 60 days in my case before I initiate the rest of the legal process.
Okay, so you answered the first question I was going to ask, which is how long would you wait?
Okay.
So now the next question is, why are you waiting 60 days? I have my answer, but I want to hear yours first. This is a fun episode, by the way.
No, it's tough because, and I did a short YouTube video on the lumpy borrower, the payments, borrowers that pay, reinstate several times a year. We've talked about that before.
I hate
those can become they're really not profitable, especially in the low dollar range. But so I definitely want to avoid that, right? But I've had many cases where borrowers fall a couple months behind, then they catch up, and then they stay caught up. So it's a business decision in my view. I mean, do I want to drop $100, $150 or whatever it is for the next round of communication?
Next round's a complaint, which will probably cost you between $800 and $1,500.
Yeah,
which in some states is recoverable, but that would probably be the next step. Is you do the complaint. So
yeah, and exactly, it is, a lot of it is state dependent, whether like North Carolina could be recoverable, maybe not. Florida, it's almost always recoverable. It really depends, but that's why I'm not spending $800 when they might get caught up the next month, and get those late fees is not the worst thing in the world. Yeah, how about you?
So you hit the nail on the head when you said I'm not spending the $800 because I typically wait, and similar to the same reason as you, if you're spending that $800, then all of a sudden they're like, oh, they make the payment, and then you're like, oh man, it's $800. That again, it's recoverable, but all you're doing is, spending money to get it back. You're not benefiting or gaining from that. One thing that I would say kind of plays into this a little bit is also the communication factor. If they call and say, I can't make a payment because of X, I am going to be much easier to grasp and deal with that than somebody that just doesn't respond. And then when they're getting reach out, they're not responding. Now, some of the things I've done in the past is if they missed a payment, I would tell the attorney, hey, can you send a letter, or even have the attorney maybe try and call them because it's a different number from the servicer, and say, look, if we don't have the payment by the 21st of the month, then unfortunately we're going to cancel a forbearance plan. And once that happens, you're going to have to fully reinstate the loan. We need to hear back from you as soon as possible on, how you want to proceed. So that's another option that's a little less cost prohibitive than that demand. But that's the thing people got to weigh in is, it's great. Okay, yes, good. I'm going to go. But, how many times do all of a sudden you tell the attorney, go, they file that complaint, which takes a week or two, and all of a sudden you hear from the borrower, and oops, they made that $500 payment. Now it's like, oh, now what do I do?
Right. Yeah. And this is, this is where we come in. We can have some discretion and use our own judgment versus Chase Bank or whoever is not really dealing with the borrower in this case. So, it is, unfortunately, this is where it really gets murky, and you do have to put on your kind of detective hat or therapist hat and determine, really, do I trust this borrower? How communicative are they?
It's a gut feeling, not an analytical decision in some sense
Mhm.
of, and this comes, I think, from experience a little bit as well. And this is where this isn't a black and white area of note investing. And this is not
Yeah.
something that, again, you can open up your note training manual and say, oh, on page 12, this is what I should do in this
Right.
situation.
Yeah. I mean, I had one in Michigan where it was a CFD. Borrowers, really new to home ownership, shall we say, a very inexperienced borrower, but she'd been performing for 2.5 years or so, on time every month, no issues, and she lost her job through the COVID thing, the pandemic and the shutdown. So, and like you said, it's a gut feeling. Did I verify that she actually lost her job? No, I didn't. But I'm not going to press her if she's 45 days behind when she's been a good paying borrower, and it just doesn't make any sense from both a human standpoint and a business standpoint. And she's back on track now. I'm assuming she got another job. I'm not sure, but maybe it's from the stimulus money or something. But it would have. I'm glad I didn't initiate legal in that scenario. So
So
yeah.
and this was the situation, and I've mentioned this in the past, of why personally I believe note investors truly make their money on the management and not on the buy.
Hmm.
Because, there's
Yeah.
a buy box of where that asset is going to sell for. Now, if you overpay, there's nothing I can do. But, you and I, Jamie, and people who have experience, look at an asset, for the most part, we're going to probably pay within 10% of each other on that note,
Hmm.
plus or minus.
Yeah.
It's not going to be, I'm not going to buy something for 20 that Jamie says, oh, I can buy it. I'm going to buy it for 25. I mean, it's probably going to be
Right.
anywhere from at 20, probably going to sell anywhere from 18 to 22, which still, a wide range, but it's not, in that grand scheme of things, $1,000. But when we talk about sending a complaint that's going to cost more than that $1,000 delta, that's where I continue to talk about, people delaying things too long, as
Yeah.
well as spending money they shouldn't. That's where I think how you manage it is truly how you break down and really make money in this business, not on the
Yeah.
buy. So,
And that's where a lot of the training programs, frankly, it's not a criticism, but they fall short because it's impossible to put together a weekend training program that gets into all these weeds that we're in here now with these case studies.
mm-hmm,
You can't do a blanket one size fits all training program where you're going to go through
mm-hmm.
these scenarios. So
I, I just question anybody right now. I'm just throwing out there. If people are listening, I love feedback from people who has ever even gone to a training session where they've gone through some of these case studies like this. I'd be curious.
mhm,
I mean, I've been
yeah,
to, webinars and seminars and stuff like that. I haven't taken the weekend warrior training courses and stuff, but I can't fathom they'd even have time to go through this because of how high level they are from that standpoint, from those
right.
things.
I think they probably, go through case studies of success stories from their own portfolio and things like that. But Um, I, yeah, again, I've said this a bunch of times, but really the note space. I mean, running a note business, it's really three things: access to deals, access to capital, and asset management. And I really think asset management is. I agree with you. That's where
Mm-hmm.
it's tough to give
Mm-hmm.
a training program that's that's where you really do make your money. So
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yeah,
yeah.
in some of these deals, you see people post. If I like to use sports analogies, it's kind of like getting a hanging curveball from a pitcher, or basically you're up by 2 goals and they pull the goalie. It's an empty netter. It's like, okay, yeah, pretty much. You get those once in a while, but those aren't the ones you really should be using for the case studies. The case studies are
Right.
some of the ones we're talking about today, where you got the forbearance plan that you got them, you're excited, they're going to be, and then they miss. It's like, and then are they
Right.
communicating? Are they not? So there's a lot of roundabout
Yeah.
ways you can work through this, which, I got some actually, I'll do a little shameless plug. I got some really cool stuff that my creative brain has come up with to try and provide people some of these case studies later on down the road
Hmm.
for people to kind of get some education on. But,
Yeah.
it's tough. So,
No, I think the sports analogy, another one I heard somebody say recently, like Drew Brees. I'm sure he's not the only one, but Saints quarterback who just retired. He said it's all about, don't worry about the end result, worry about the decision making process. Did you make the right read? Did you go through your progressions as a quarterback?
Mm-hmm.
This guy's not open, next guy's not open,
Mm-hmm.
and that's how you become a Hall of Fame quarterback. It's not just the results, unless you're Tom Brady. No, but even Tom Brady, I think, would say the same thing. The results are going to follow. So, but it's the process, and so that's where I think, unfortunately, some of these case studies, you may have followed the right process, done everything correctly, but it didn't go your way. But
You
that's
still
why
lose.
you still lose, and but you still did the right thing. So and that's the kind of the converse of what you were talking about, where somebody got lucky basically,
Mm-hmm.
and made 50 grand on a deal that they really didn't know what they were doing, or
Yeah.
so it really is more about the process and making the right decision with
Well,
the information you have at the time.
well, I look back at one of our last episodes when we had Ian on, and
Yeah,
he had an asset local to him. He went through a process, and he went through those progressions that you mentioned of
right,
step A to B to C to D, and he
right,
knocked it out of the park. I mean, he did awesome on it, and for me, I wasn't able to go through those progressions on it. I passed on the
right.
deal. I wish I had gone through those
Yeah,
progressions, and good for him. So it
but
just
even if he'd made 20 grand instead of 50, he
yeah,
still did the exact same process. So
yeah.
he it's
Mm-hmm. Yep.
he did the right thing as far as managing the asset. So
Okay.
yeah, it's
Note and bolt. What you got?
note and bolt. So it actually ties into this topic pretty well. Don't forget that delinquency is not the only thing you can foreclose, not the only reason you can initiate legal, I'll say. Um, I have a case, I have another case study, one of my New York assets where property is vacant and they had fallen behind, but now they're caught up. And so in New York, we do these property inspections monthly to determine whether the property is vacant. Chris is coming up with his note and bolt right now,
Yeah.
and and so 3 months go by, property's vacant. It's abandoned. It's lots of issues with the property itself as far as work that needs to be done. And so in New York, as the lender, I'm responsible for those. Since it's a vacant property, I'm responsible for all that. So, and my initial thought was, great, I'm kind of stuck here. Although these costs are going to be recoverable, the loan is 100% caught up, so I can't foreclose. Well, bounced it off my attorney and looked at the documents, and I absolutely can start legal. I mean, it's not, even though they're 100%, they're 0 days late, but I can start the foreclosure process. So we'll see where it goes. So just remember that delinquency is not the only reason that you can initiate the legal process.
My thought on that is, wow, I can't believe I got somebody to buy my New York loans. Think of
Is
all the
that your note and bolt?
all the education experience I gave for 2 of you. You're gonna be a
And lots of, and
New York
yeah,
expert. So,
and the listeners too. I mean,
yeah.
it's the gift that
Uh,
keeps on giving.
so my note and bolt is a question to you.
Uh-oh.
Do you put any extra weight into performing loans where the borrower is on ACH?
Yes, I don't think I don't have, it's not part of my calculator. Okay, but it's a subjective
Mhm.
thing, but absolutely. And when you say ACH, that's probably you mean a scheduled ACH, because you can
Yes,
pay,
a scheduled
you know,
ACH where they fill out the form and say on the 30th of the month, take the
right.
money out for my payment.
I think that has weight to it for sure.
Mhm.
Yes. How about
Okay.
you?
I do. It's interesting though, because I've had some recently who were on ACH and it was like getting screwed up or something wasn't happening and the
Mm,
money wasn't getting pulled. And there's some pointing fingers back and forth on who's at fault. But
hmm.
what ended up coming down to was, trying to get the payments were coming in. So we were trying to get in touch with the borrower and I actually did send a demand letter, and they're like, "What are you talking about? I'm on ACH." And let's be honest, I have my mortgage ACH, so I honestly don't check if
Look at it.
it's
Yeah.
getting deposited or withdrawn. And a lot of these others where these payments are about the same as a car payment, mine's a little more than a car payment, so I would probably notice mine from that perspective, that I have, well, where'd all this, why do I still have this much money in my account?
Yeah.
But for those on some, where your payment's 500 and they're paying 400 on a car, they may not even notice. And that's what
Right.
happened with this person. They didn't notice. And then it was like, oh, we got it squared away.
Right.
But there's good and bad with it. But yes, I would say, to answer the question as well, I do put a little more weight into it. Again,
I mean,
go ahead.
it's human nature to, they say that with saving or investing, you want to just make it as automatic as possible so you don't have to think about it. You want to remove any barriers to completing that action. So yes, I do. Yeah, it could get screwed up, but it got fixed. And I definitely think there's a much better chance that the loan is going to continue to perform if they're on a scheduled ACH plan. So yeah.
Okay. Well, that's all I got. Anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up this episode of the Good Deeds No Investing podcast, Jamie?
No, this has been good. Go out and do some good deeds.
Yep. So thanks everyone for listening. As always, if you could leave us a review at Apple Podcasts, is what it's called now. I can forget. And actually, they just rolled out something new for podcasters and listeners and so forth, with a new app coming out with iOS, whatever they're at now. But if you could leave us a review, that would be awesome, because it allows us to get more subscribers, get a little higher ranked from that perspective. But as always, go out and do some good deeds. Thanks for listening, everybody.